Have you ever found yourself browsing digital cameras and wonder why that Sony Alpha 7S III for $4,000 boasts having a 12.1 megapixel sensor, while the $79 no-name at Target claims to be 64 megapixels? The answer to this question is one of marketing and, as is so often the case with consumer electronics, a bit of misleading on the part of the cheaper units claiming the higher specs. But before we get into that, let's take a moment to refresh ourselves on what a megapixel is and why it matters. Pixel has been around since 1965, when NASA needed a means of defining the individual elements of a digital image. Mega didn't really come along until 1986 as a means of easily defining a million. Come to think of it, we could very nearly be calling them millipixels today. Anyway, Kodak was very proud at the time to have produced a digital camera sensor capable of capturing 1.4 million pixels, or 1.4 megapixel. When a reputable brand like Sony, or Canon, or Nikon, or Panasonic tells you their camera is 24 megapixel, they're referring to the native resolution of the sensor itself. 24 megapixel in this case means the sensor contains 24 million individual photo sites. You may say to yourself, then shouldn't it be 24 megasites instead of megapixels? Well, the short explanation is that each of these photo sites represents the hardware that translates the image into a digital signal that becomes a pixel on screen. This is why, as a general rule of thumb, a higher megapixel sensor is capable of capturing more information than a lower megapixel one. There are exceptions to this, of course, as more megapixels mean each individual photo site is smaller, but that's a debate for another day. For the purpose of this video, let's assume bigger means better, because that leads us into why you may see massive megapixel numbers in the marketing materials of cheap cameras. In short, these lesser-known brands are advertising not the native sensor resolution, but the highest file size their camera can output. What does this mean? Well, that low-cost camera boasting 64 megapixels very likely contains a sensor somewhere in the ballpark of 7 or 8 megapixels. The software inside the camera then takes the information captured by the sensor and it blows it up digitally until the outputted file contains a resolution of approximately 64 million pixels. If you wonder how 7 million pixels becomes 64 million, we call this interpolation or upscaling. Essentially, algorithms calculate and fill in new pixels based on the existing ones as needed to increase the size of the image file. Do these algorithms always get it right? Nope. This is why an upscaled image often contains noise, artifacting, strange stretching, and unnatural color. A crude analogy to what's taking place would be like snapping a 10 megapixel photo, opening it in Photoshop, and stretching the dimensions until the file was 100 megapixels worth of data. This would work, but wouldn't be the same as telling people you had a 100 megapixel camera.